When German women surrendered or were captured by American forces during the final chaotic months of World War II, many did so in absolute terror, not only because the war was collapsing around them, but because they had been warned relentlessly that American soldiers would abuse them the moment they fell into Allied hands. And for some women, the fear was so intense that their first words upon seeing U.S. troops were not questions about food or shelter, but desperate pleas for personal safety, whispered or spoken aloud in panic. "Please don't hurt us," or "Please don't touch us." Phrases that revealed just how deeply Nazi propaganda had shaped their expectations. For years, official warnings, rumors, and fear-driven stories had painted Americans as violent, uncontrolled men who treated enemy women as spoils of war, and in the absence of reliable information, those stories became accepted truth, especially among young women who had already witnessed brutality, displacement, and the collapse of civil order as the front lines shifted. Yet what followed after capture stunned them into silence, because instead of threats or violations, the American soldiers kept their distance, followed procedure, and treated the women with a level of restraint and professionalism that felt almost unreal to those who had braced themselves for the worst. With guards assigning female quarters, enforcing rules against harassment, and speaking calmly through interpreters, making it clear that the women were under protection, not threat. Several women later recalled moments of overwhelming confusion when hours passed, then days, without a single inappropriate gesture, raised voice, or act of intimidation, and the realization slowly set in that the danger they had been conditioned to expect simply was not coming. A psychological shift that left many emotionally shaken because fear does not disappear easily when it has been cultivated for years. American camp policies, rooted in military discipline and the Geneva Convention, strictly prohibited abuse, and soldiers were reminded that violations would carry severe consequences. But for the women experiencing this firsthand, the rules mattered less than the lived reality, which was defined by boundaries being respected, privacy being maintained, and dignity being preserved even in captivity. In testimonies given decades later, some women admitted that the most shocking part was not kindness, but normalcy. The way soldiers spoke to them without hostility, the way they looked away rather than stare, the way guards intervened if anyone crossed a line because these quiet behaviors contradicted everything they had been taught about power, masculinity, and enemy behavior. Historians note that the collapse of propaganda often happens not through confrontation, but through contradiction. And for these women, the contradiction was undeniable, because the men they had feared most became the first authority figures in years to show restraint, self-control, and respect, forcing them to confront how deeply their fears had been manipulated. Over time, the women's posture changed, conversations grew louder, sleep came easier, and the constant state of vigilance slowly eased, replaced by cautious relief and disbelief, as they realized that safety did not depend on obedience or submission, but on rules applied consistently and enforced without cruelty. Some women later expressed a complicated mix of gratitude and anger. Gratitude toward the soldiers who treated them with dignity, and anger toward the system that had terrified them into expecting violence as the norm, because the absence of harm became proof of how thoroughly they had been deceived. In the broader context of World War II, these experiences remain less visible than battlefield victories or political decisions, yet they reveal something essential about the aftermath of conflict, showing that how captors treat the vulnerable can shape memory, identity, and understanding for a lifetime, and that for German women who entered American custody pleading for mercy they never needed to ask for, the greatest shock was not what happened, but what did not happen, as restraint, discipline, and basic respect quietly dismantled years of fear, leaving behind a lesson more powerful than force, that true authority does not need violation, and that dignity, when upheld in the darkest moments, can echo long after the war itself has ended.